The millionaire's newborn screamed every night. Doctors found nothing. 3 nannies quit. But when a poor black maid in her crisp uniform lifted the corner of that luxury mattress, she discovered a nightmare crawling beneath, thousands of maggots feasting on decay. What she did next exposed the secret that shattered a family's perfect image forever. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments, what time is it and where are you watching from? Let's start. The baby's screams echoed through the marble hallways of the Montgomery mansion at 3 in the morning, again. Tamara pressed her palm against the bedroom door, her black maid's uniform still crisp despite the late hour, the white apron tied neatly at her waist. At 29 years old, she'd worked in this house for 6 months, and she'd never heard anything like this. The crying was different tonight, raw, desperate, almost primal. "Tamara!" Victoria Montgomery's voice cut through the hallway. The millionaire appeared in her silk robe, her face tight with exhaustion and something else, anger maybe, fear. "Why is he still crying? You're supposed to handle this." "Mrs. Montgomery, I've tried everything. I don't pay you to try, I pay you to succeed." Victoria's diamond earrings caught the chandelier light as she turned away. "My husband has an important meeting in 4 hours. Make it stop." Tamara entered the nursery, her heart sinking at the sound. Little Oliver, just 3 weeks old, lay in his gold-framed crib, his tiny face purple with distress. His naked body thrashed against the pristine white sheets. And Tamara noticed something she hadn't before, red marks along his back. She lifted him gently, cradling him against her chest. "Shh, baby boy, I'm here, I've got you." But Oliver didn't calm. If anything, his cries intensified. Tamara had been a nanny before becoming a maid. She knew babies. She knew their different cries. Hunger, discomfort, fear. This wasn't any of those. This was agony. She'd watched Victoria and Thomas Montgomery bring their son home from the hospital 2 weeks ago. They'd hired 3 different nannies in that time. Each one quit within days, claiming the baby was impossible or colicky beyond help. That's when they'd asked Tamara to add childcare to her duties, promising a small raise she desperately needed to send back to her mother in Louisiana. The pediatrician had visited twice. "Some babies just cry more," he'd said with a dismissive shrug. "Colic, he'll grow out of it." But Tamara didn't believe that anymore. She paced the room, bouncing Oliver gently, studying every inch of the nursery. Everything looked perfect. Expensive organic crib sheets, a state-of-the-art baby monitor, a temperature-controlled room. Yet something felt wrong. She'd noticed it before, the way Oliver would calm in her arms only to scream the moment she laid him back down. Not just fussy, terrified. "What is it, sweetheart?" she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "What's hurting you?" Oliver's crying had woken her every night this week. She'd stumbled from her small room in the staff quarters, exhausted, to find Victoria or Thomas at her door with the same demand: fix it. Tonight, she made a decision. She laid Oliver gently on the changing table, examining him carefully. The red marks on his back were more pronounced now, small, irritated welts that looked almost like bites. Her stomach turned. She returned to the crib, leaning over to look more closely at the mattress. The sheets were fresh. She'd changed them herself that morning. But as she pressed her hand down, she felt something. A dampness, a slight give that shouldn't be there in a new mattress. Tamara glanced at the door. The hallway was quiet. Victoria had gone back to her master suite on the other side of the mansion. She reached down and lifted the corner of the fitted sheet. At first, she thought she was seeing shadows. Then her eyes adjusted, and the truth crashed into her like a physical blow. The mattress wasn't just damp, it was rotting, and it was alive. Hundreds, no, thousands of maggots writhing across the surface, burrowing into dark, decomposing patches. The padding had deteriorated into something black and fetid, and among the decay she could see the outlines of what looked like dead insects, mold, and something else she couldn't identify. Tamara's hand flew to her mouth. She staggered backward, Oliver still on the changing table, and pulled the sheet back further. The entire mattress was infested. Her mind reeled. How? How could this happen in a mansion worth $15 million? How could a baby, a newborn baby, be sleeping on something that looked like it had been rotting in a basement for years? She looked at Oliver, now whimpering softly, his little body covered in those red welts. Bites from whatever was living in that mattress, from maggots crawling across his skin every time he was laid down to sleep. Rage and horror flooded through her in equal measure. She grabbed her phone from her apron pocket and took photos. The mattress, the infestation, Oliver's back. Then she lifted Oliver back into her arms, holding his naked body protectively against her chest, feeling his tiny heartbeat against hers. "No more," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've got you now. No more." But as she turned toward the door, she froze. Victoria stood in the doorway, her face pale in the low light, and from the expression on her face, Tamara realized something that made her blood run cold. Victoria knew. She'd always known. "Put my son down." Victoria's voice was ice. Tamara held Oliver tighter, her uniform pressing against his warm skin. "Mrs. Montgomery, this mattress, it's full of maggots. It's rotting. He's been sleeping on—" "I said, put him down." Victoria stepped into the room, her silk robe flowing behind her. "That's a $1,500 mattress, organic, hypoallergenic. Look at it." Tamara gestured with her free hand at the exposed corner where the maggots continued their grotesque dance under the nursery's soft lighting. "Look at what your baby has been sleeping on." Victoria's eyes flicked to the mattress, and for just a moment something cracked in her perfect facade. Guilt. Shame. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. That's impossible. We bought it new from the best store in the city." "When? When did you buy it?" Victoria's silence was answer enough. Tamara's mind raced back through the conversation she'd overheard while cleaning. Victoria complaining about the cost of the nursery renovation, Thomas snapping at her about unnecessary expenses when she was 7 months pregnant, the tension between them that hung in the mansion like smoke. "You didn't buy it new," Tamara said slowly, the pieces falling into place. "You got it second-hand, used. It was a good deal. A friend was selling furniture." Victoria's perfect composure was crumbling. "It looked fine. It was barely used," she said. "Barely used?" Tamara's voice rose. "Mrs. Montgomery, this mattress is rotting from the inside. It's been wet, probably water damage, and now it's full of maggots and God knows what else. Your son has been sleeping on decay." Oliver whimpered against her chest, and Tamara felt his tiny fingers curl into her uniform. "I didn't know." Victoria's voice was barely a whisper now. "I thought Thomas handled the furniture. He said it was fine. I was so tired after the birth and everything was so expensive, and he kept saying we needed to cut costs somewhere." "Cut costs?" Tamara couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You live in a $15 million mansion. You have a chandelier in every room, and you put your baby on a rotting, infested mattress to save money?" Victoria's face hardened again. "Watch your tone. You're the maid." "No." Tamara's voice was still. "I'm a human being, and right now I'm the only person in this house protecting this child." She walked past Victoria, heading for the door. "Where are you taking him?" "Away from that crib, away from that mattress." Tamara turned back, her dark eyes blazing. "And if you try to stop me, the photos on my phone go to Child Protective Services tonight." Victoria's face went white. "You wouldn't." Tamara carried Oliver down the hallway to her small room in the staff quarters. It wasn't much, a twin bed, a dresser, a window overlooking the service entrance, but it was clean, safe. She laid Oliver on her bed, surrounded by pillows so he wouldn't roll, and grabbed every soft towel she had. She created a makeshift nest, warm and protected, and placed him gently in the center. For the first time in hours, Oliver began to settle. His cries softened to whimpers, then to soft breathing. Tamara sat beside him, her hand on his tiny chest, watching him finally find peace. She didn't sleep. She just watched over him. This tiny, innocent life who'd been suffering in silence while everyone around him ignored his pain. At 6 o'clock in the morning, her door burst open. Thomas Montgomery stood there, his business suit already on, his face purple with rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing with my son?" Tamara rose slowly, positioning herself between Thomas and the bed, protecting him. "Victoria told me about your accusations. You're fired. Get out of my house." "Not without calling CPS first."
Thomas's expression shifted from anger to something more calculating. "You're a maid from Louisiana with no family here and no resources. You think anyone will believe you over us, over a family like ours? I have photos, and I have 3 weeks of documented reports about your son's colic that every doctor dismissed. I also have photos of his back. Those are bite marks from insects from the mattress you bought him." Thomas's jaw clenched. "That was a mistake," he muttered. "Victoria told me it was new when you bought it from some friend for cheap, without checking, without caring." Tamara stepped forward. "Your son has been tortured every night because you wanted to save a few $100s. The words hung in the air between them. Behind Thomas, Victoria appeared, her eyes red from crying. "Richard, she's right. Look at him. He's sleeping." Actually sleeping. Thomas looked at his son, peaceful in Tamara's bed, and something in his face broke. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I thought the doctor said colic. I thought it would pass." "You didn't check. You didn't look. You were too busy with your meetings and your reputation to see what was happening to your own child." The silence stretched long. Finally, Victoria spoke. "What do we do now?" Tamara looked at them both, these wealthy, powerful people who'd been brought low by their own negligence. "Now you burn that mattress. You have Oliver checked by a real pediatrician, not one who dismisses his pain. You treat those bites, and you decide what kind of parents you want to be." Thomas nodded slowly. "And you? Will you stay?" Tamara looked down at Oliver, this tiny, innocent life who'd suffered because the people who should have protected him had failed. "I'll stay until I know he's safe. But things change. I'm not just the maid anymore. I'm his advocate. And if I ever see anything like this again, these photos go public." Victoria began to cry again, but this time Tamara saw something real in those tears. Remorse, shame, maybe even love. "Thank you," Victoria whispered. "Thank you for caring when we didn't." Tamara didn't respond. She simply sat back down beside Oliver, her hand returning to his tiny chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Outside the window, the sun began to rise over the mansion's manicured grounds, the beginning of a new day, and for Oliver, finally a chance to sleep without pain. If this story shook you, imagine how many children suffer in silence while those around them look away. Tamara's courage saved a life. Your share could spread awareness. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and comment what you would do in her place.